So you've made the decision. You're going to go ahead and buy your first motion picture camera. The question is, what should you buy? What should you look out for? And what format should you start with? First off, you have to ask yourself a very important question. What do you want to do with motion picture film? Do you want to shoot home movies? Do you want to shoot music videos? Do you want to be able to shoot sync sound stuff where the camera's quiet and you can use a wireless microphone and a recorder to record dialogue? Do you care about projecting? Do you care about just scanning your films and not worrying about projection? These are all really important questions. And it all comes down to figuring out what works best for you. I would probably start with Super 8. I think Super 8 is a great introductory format for that kind of budget, $200. You can buy a camera and a projector for about $200, maybe a little bit more than that. And you can shoot reversal stocks because both reversal black and white and reversal color stock exist now. So it's relatively easy to go buy Ektachrome stock for color and Tri-X or Plus X for black and white, shoot them and process them. There's several labs that can do it in the world. And then all you do is just get it back from the lab and project it, right? So it's really easy. In terms of cameras, I definitely think that in the world of Super 8, you need to think about the most modern camera you can afford, okay? Because what's happening is that a lot of the original cameras that came out when Super 8 was first developed don't have the automatic detection for the kind of film stock you have that the later cameras have. And there's a lot of videos about this online. Don't need to go into too many details, but these cameras automatically correct your exposure for you, right? And the way they do that is they have this stepped or notched grooves that the cartridge actually aligns into. You'll see this little hole in the top of the cartridge. This hole's either largened or it's either enlarged or it's decreased depending on the type of film stock it is, depending on the ISO. And a lot of the older cameras don't have those pins or that a set way of actually accessing this. So you have to be very, very careful, because if you want to shoot modern stocks, including the color negative stocks, at some point in your life, you need to buy a modern camera to do that. Another thing to think about is that a lot of the low-cost modern cameras have some inherent flaws in them. A lot of them are not very well made, first off. The plastic ones are usually pretty garbage. Any of the low-end ones are really, really garbage, and they're just going to fall apart on you. What happens is that a lot of them are belt drive, and if they're not belt drive, they have problems with tape and glued parts of the viewfinder that just fall apart. The glue just fails, and it falls apart. Inside the cameras, there are rubber components that cover this area and cover around here that, and a lot of cameras go bad very, very fast and don't exist anymore, and you have to replace those. My Elmos, I have a whole video about replacing all my Elmos because it's such a big problem. So you have to really think about the camera. And that's why I always promote this Yashica. Because this camera, which is an Electro 600, is completely, totally bulletproof. It does stop motion. It's a nice little handle camera. It doesn't make too much noise when you're shooting. It has the ability to adjust a little bit of the aperture, so you can adjust this so that it'll be backlit, so it'll increase the aperture, or it'll be spotlight where it'll decrease the aperture a little bit, which is kind of nice, very simple. And it has those notches, so it'll take all the modern film stock. This is a great beginner camera. You can get these on eBay for like $60 any day of the week, no problem at all. The only problem it has is a little bit of a slow lens, so you will be using this outdoors mostly, not going to use it indoors. It's not the right thing. For indoor cameras, if you want to shoot indoors and you want to have a faster lens camera, you're looking at a lot more money. You're looking at more of a plasticky, modern Japanese brand like Elmo, or maybe even a Bolex, but these are really expensive and a whole different planet. So that's something to think about if you care about that. But most people who shoot Super 8 are going to go outside, they're going to shoot. You shoot 5 or 6 rolls a year. You've got your projector. You're projecting them for your friends. You might buy a little splicer to tape things together so you have a little reel. And then if you want to scan it someday, you can scan it. But remember, scanning is very expensive. You're going to be spending $100 and some odd per roll of film to get it, to buy it, to process it, and to transfer it. It's going to be over $100 per roll of film. So that's a lot of money. Whereas if you just buy the roll of film and just process it and project it yourself, you're going to save a lot of money, and it's going to be kind of cool. It's kind of retro to be able to project your own stuff. So that's a great beginning spot for people who have a couple $100 to blow. So now you come to me and you say, hey, I've got $500 to spend, and it's just going to be for a camera, and I'm not going to really spend much money on a projector because I want to scan my film. That's a whole different planet. If you're really planning on just scanning your film, you don't have to worry about projectors, then I think I would just completely forget Super 8 exists. Just boop, gone, I'm done. And focus on 16. So there are really very few 16 cameras in that price range. You're below the price range where you can get acceptable equipment. But what you can get is this monstrosity, which is called a K3. And it is probably the best sub $300 16 camera ever made. And they made them up until the 80s, so you can get them on eBay for relatively cheap. You can get Super 16 versions of these for under $500. They make a lot of noise, but they're really great cameras. I have a whole video about this camera coming up that you're going to love, and it really breaks it down into depth. And frankly, I have a love-hate relationship with this camera because where it is difficult to load because the auto load system is garbage and you take it out, so it's kind of tricky to load, and the stability is not very good because it has some design flaws. It is very well made and extremely robust. The design is really fantastic. And so this thing will last forever. This thing will outlast everybody who's watching this video. It'll outlast me. This thing will be around forever. So it's also a spinning mirror reflex camera. So it works very similar to a professional camera. No beam splitter, none of that stuff. So when the light comes in the lens, it goes directly onto the film instead of like Super 8 cameras and a lot of 16 cameras where it gets split through a beam splitter first so you can look through the viewfinder. And that loses a little bit of light. So it makes the camera not as fast as it could be. But this thing at, when you're at T1.9, which is what this stock lens goes to, you're getting all that light onto the film, which is really great. The thing about this camera that's really great is that not only does it have a stock zoom lens, a 17-69, which is not the best in the planet, but it exists. But it has a really simple screw mount. It's micro four thirds based. So the lens is pretty easy to deal with. You can get different adapters for this so that you can put different lenses on it. And has a decently bright viewfinder, not very bright, but decently bright. And it takes 100-foot daylight spools. So you can just start out by shooting daylight spools, which is the easiest way to start. And just shoot a couple rolls and see what you like, right? Let's just say you got $1,000 to spend. Well, I would not recommend the K3. If you got $1,000 to spend, don't get a K3. You could do a Canon Scupic, which is another great all electronic camera that Canon made. It does have a beam splitter, but whatever. It's still a good camera. A pretty fast lens. Definitely has a better motor drive system than this thing does because it's electronic motor. And it's definitely a step up from this in many ways. And you can get them on eBay, by people who don't want to get $1 million for them for about $1,000. They're about $1,000 nowadays. And there's a battery pack that you can buy from a couple of companies, including Dual Camera. That's an upgrade for the stock battery pack and stuff like that. And that's a great camera. And eventually I'll buy one and bring it on the show so you guys can see it, because I think that it's definitely an option. The other option, of course, is one of my favorite cameras of all time, the Bolex. But the problem is all the Bolexes nowadays that are in the $1,000 or below range are all manual cameras, wind-up cameras. And if you're going to take it up a notch in your work, you really need an electronic camera because you need a camera that's going to be a little more stable with speed. And those Bolexes, even though they're really stable with speed, they're not great because remember that you're transferring it then on a telecine machine, and the telecine machine is going to run at a different speed than the camera. And so if you're doing like a music video or something like that, you need to have a camera that is somewhat close to crystal sync speed. You're not going to get that with Super 8 cameras, and you're not going to get that with this, but you will get it with something like an EBM or an SBM or an EL, one of those kind of later models. The other camera company to think about in that price range is Bolex, and they make what's called an R16. And the R16, they have a wind-up version and a motor-driven version. They also take 200-foot magazines in the later generation, which is kind of nice to have. It's hard to get 200-foot film, but you could break it down off 400-foot rolls. So it does expand your abilities to shoot with. And so, the R16 is a good way to go. Bolex best 16 camera is called a 2016, but they are really rare and not in that $1,000 price range. You might be able to find something that's a little bit bigger and older, like a CP16, that's another way to go. But I think you're out of the price bracket for an Eclair or something a little bit more sync soundy for $1,000. And I don't think $1,000 is a lot of money to spend on a camera nowadays. You know, the market has changed so much in the last 5 years. Camera prices have skyrocketed. You know, cameras like the K3 have kind of stayed stable, but cameras like the Bolex have gone crazy. So if you're a beginner and you kind of want to get into it, you know, I really suggest you starting small, right? Spend a couple $100, enjoy a camera like a K3, shoot reversal, shoot color negative, transfer it to video, or maybe even get a projector and project the film, doesn't matter. And then kind of work your way up, right? Sell it or keep it and buy something else like the Blue or the Bolex or something that's electronic. And then the next tier after that is kind of the professional tier, right? So once you get past these kind of smaller 100-foot daylight spool cameras, then you get into the world of the Aries and you get into the world of sync sound cameras, and it all costs a lot more money to deal with. Not only are the cameras more expensive, but the accessories like the lenses and stuff are more expensive. Everything goes astronomical. And one thing I think about is that all these cameras are pretty much standard 16. You know, you're not going to get a Super 16 camera for under $1,000 unless it's a K3, and you don't really need Super 16, okay? Everybody makes a big deal of it. Just shoot your movies, you know? Just go have fun, shoot some fun stuff. It's fine. The little bit of room that you're missing on Super 16 on the side of the frame is not a big deal. The cost to get Super 16 up and running, because it's both lenses and camera, is a lot. You know, it's a lot of money. So don't spend the money on Super 16. Spend the money on shooting films, okay? That's where you should go. In terms of what to look for when buying used, I think you have to kind of look at a couple of things related to the seller. So has the seller on eBay or even on Facebook, you know, or on Craigslist, has the seller sold the cameras before? Is the seller a collector or someone who just bought a camera at a sale and is just reselling it? Is the camera considered working condition, and can you return it if it's not in working condition? The biggest problem with these old cameras is the lenses will get fungus in them. So you have to be very, very cautious about that. So you have to make sure that the seller understands that if the camera does have fungus in the lens, that you're going to return it. You do not want the camera that's got fungus in the lens. Stay away from it. You don't want a camera that's got damaged lenses at all. Even though you can replace the lens, you don't want to deal with that. You just want to have a camera that's just going to shoot, right? So you don't want to deal with it. I would stay away from any camera that's got problems like that. The other thing to think about is that a lot of these cameras have physical damage on them. And if they've been dropped, the viewfinder might be damaged. So if they're physically good condition, and if you can get a video from the guy of the thing actually running, so you know it actually works, and that's a good start. And then when you receive the camera, make sure that the guy has a return policy. Make sure that you can return it if it doesn't work, or they'll give you a discount towards the service of getting it working. And then go out immediately and buy a roll of film and shoot it and scan it and take a look at what take a look at what it comes out like. Pro 8 right now has a little 30-foot film pack that they sell that's double perf stock, and you can. The reason why they did this was because it's a great way of testing cameras. So I think it's 30 feet of film. It includes processing and transfer and everything. So you just buy it from their website, get it, shoot the 30 feet out, and then get it processed and transferred to make sure the camera works good before you go out and shoot something big. Because most of these cameras aren't going to work properly on the first time you shoot them. I've had dozens of cameras go through here, and only the commercial cameras kind of work. The consumer-based cameras like these never work right. I've rebuilt this one. I've rebuilt this one. This one I've gone through 2 or 3 times. It is not easy to get a camera that 100% works the first time out of the gate. And there's a lot of great service guys in the United States who can work on most of these kind of cameras, no problem at all. Bill U is very widely supported. Bolex is very widely supported. Cameras like this are just, you just buy another one. It doesn't work because they're so cheap, so it's not a big deal. And the K3 is kind of a hodgepodge because the K3 you can kind of get some support by users, but the thing's such bulletproof camera, you probably don't need much support. And if it did stop working, you could always just buy another one because they're so cheap, right? It's not the end of the world. You could buy a body with no lens, you know? It's not the end of the world. So I do think that I think the risk factor with 16 is less than the risk factor with Super 8 in terms of getting a good camera that works, that doesn't have light leaks and pulls the film down properly. You're probably going to have better luck on 16 than Super 8. Now, of course, the other way to start is to shoot on stills. And that's a little bit easier to get into, a little bit lower cost, and you can get into stills for a couple $100 with a camera and lenses and everything. So you might want to think about that before doing motion picture if you just want to get into film in general. But because our channel is more about motion picture, I suggest 16 millimeter to start with, especially if you have a budget of $500 or less. So thanks for watching. I hope that you learned something from this video. We're going to have more videos about the different formats and why I kind of like one or the other. But this video is more about beginner buyers, and I hope that I'm not assuming that beginner buyers have more money than they do. I think that in today's world, spending $500 on a camera is not the end of the world. I think most people can do that if they're going to try to shoot on a film, because they know film's expensive. So $500 is not the end of the world. And I think that if you want to do it and do it right, 16 is the way to go. Flat out. Totally way to go. Don't keep it under your bed. Keep it beside you, shooting all the time, and you're going to love it. It's a great format. So thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.